You are listening to By the Book, because if you don't look at the world through the Bible, you will never see it right.
This is Alan Griffith, your host for episode 44 of By the Book. Glad you're listening today. I really want to pick up exactly where we were at the end of the last podcast and talk again about this mess of gender confusion. And I made a statement last time, and I just want to pick up on it, and I want to follow through on it a little bit. I made reference to what's called gender dysphoria, and that simply is when someone rejects their biological person, their biological gender, and they reject it thinking, hoping, wondering if they are, in fact, something else. Well, the truth is they are not something else. Their DNA established what their gender would be before they were ever born. Nobody assigns gender. There's no reason to wait to assign gender. There's no reason to wait until a young person gets indoctrinated and makes some choice about gender or makes some gender selection. All of this is foolishness. All of this is wickedness. In my mind, this is a crime against society, and it is a growing crime against young people. Now, what's really going on when somebody says, I know my body says that I'm male, but I feel like I'm female? And then this person may want to take steps to follow through on that. It could be drugs, it could be surgery, whatever. But what is really happening? What is really happening to that person? Well, I want to tell you what's happening. They are mentally, morally, and emotionally confused and corrupted. That's the truth. That's where they are. And unfortunately, we have a society, and a great part of that society being the medical profession, who is advocating for this, who is encouraging this, who is involved in helping some people, some young, some old, to try to make this transformation, if you will, from one gender to another. And all they are doing is strengthening that confusion and that wickedness. Now, folks, this is wrong. Not long ago, I heard the American Academy of Pediatrics was getting involved in this, and some of them are advocating drugs and so on to push children in the direction of their preferred gender. And of course, again, there's the advocacy of surgery. I'm grateful that I've seen some recently, some folks who went through some of that, and now they realized how terrible it was and what a mistake they made, and they wish that somebody had stopped them and helped them, but they have done a whole lot to ruin their life. Not long ago, I was listening to a discussion on TV about this subject, and I was given the impression by the introduction that the two people, the two guests, would be giving a conservative position. Well, the conservative position of the one person was, well, we shouldn't do surgery, but some drugs of some kind may be appropriate to help these people. That was one position. The other position, similar in the sense of, yes, we got to be careful about drugs and surgery. So I thought, okay, that's starting to make sense. But then the person said this, listen, they said, but if you have a child who has gender dysphoria, They are a particular gender biologically, but they think that they are another gender. What is important is that you love them and affirm them and help them. And at that point, I wanted to yell and grab somebody and say, "What on earth are you talking about?" Listen, you don't love and affirm confusion. You don't give love and affirmation to wickedness, to sinfulness. Well, what do you do? Well, you present, listen to it, the truth. The truth. Where is truth? Don't be afraid of truth. Love the truth. Stand for the truth. Speak the truth. Educate with the truth. A young person says, "Well, I know that biologically I am a male, but I think I'm a female." You say, "Wait, listen, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. There's a God in heaven who created you. There's a God in heaven who designed you. And when, even before you were born, your DNA established your gender, and that's what you are. And if you need help to learn that and to be strengthened in that and to be encouraged in that and to get rid of your confused thinking, I would love to help you. I would love to walk with you through that. But listen, you don't look at the child and say, "Oh, well, if that's what you think, then I'm just going to love you and help you and affirm you." No, that's wrong. And that wickedness and that foolishness and that stupidity is what is causing tremendous confusion among young people today. I have people telling me of friends of their children who are saying that they think they're the opposite gender, and I wonder, where on earth are their parents? Listen, don't be afraid of the truth. Don't buy into the lies of the politicians and even medical professionals today. Certainly not the lies of the psychologists and the psychiatrists and that whole crowd who doesn't care about truth. Don't be afraid of them. Speak the truth. And don't be afraid to use the Bible as your authority, because it is the Word of God. God created male and female, and that's all there is. That's all there is. I mentioned a couple of sessions ago that if you were a male and you wanted a gender reassignment surgery, how many choices do you think you would have? Listen, you'd only have one. You can't say, "Well, I want to be a gender bender, I want to be this or that." No, they would say, "Well, I can't do anything about that. I can't help you with that." You know why they can't help you? Because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It only exists in a person's mind. And if there's anything we need to do is get our mind aligned with truth, and you're going to get truth from the Bible. So I'm encouraging you, no matter what your setting is, whether it's your community, your school, your church, I don't know what the setting might be for you, but you need to know the truth. You need to stand for the truth, and don't be ashamed of it. That's why we're losing this battle. That's why our nation is being corrupted. That's why families are falling apart, because nobody is speaking the truth. Now, having said all that, I want to get back to Romans 1. Romans 1 is a passage of Scripture we have been into and discussing and kind of making our way through it, but we've gotten off on a few tangents because the Bible lets us know that when you reject God, there's no telling where you're going to end up. When you reject the truth of the Bible, there's no telling where you're going to end up. You are going to end up totally confused. You're going to end up in terrible wickedness. And I'll tell you, sometimes I wonder, what will the next level of wickedness be? And I'm not sure, but I'll tell you this, whatever it is, it's coming. It's coming. Because again, when you walk away from God, you cut yourself off from God's truth. And there's no way to know where the corrupted mind is going to lead you, where the corrupted emotions are going to lead you. They're going to take you in all directions. And you talk about vain imaginations. That's exactly where the person without God, the person without the Bible, is headed. And unfortunately, that crowd is in control of an awful lot of things in the United States today. Well, I want to go to verse 25, Romans 1, talking about these people who walked away from God. And so God said, okay, I'm going to give you over to uncleanness. I want to tell you again, I fear that's where the United States is. I really do. I mean, God can do anything, and God is able to bring a revival. But I want to tell you something. The person who rejects God, the person who walks away from God, having known the truth, or a nation that walks away from God, having known the truth, often will never come back. And the reason they won't come back, and we don't know for sure where we are, but the reason they won't come back is because God stops convicting, as we pointed out last time, and God gives them over to their wickedness. And when God says, okay, I'm not going to convict you anymore, I'm not going to deal with you anymore, you want to live that way, I'm going to give you over to that. That's a dangerous place to be for a person, for a family, and I want to tell you, for a society or for a country. So verse 25, we made reference to it last time. People stay religious even though they reject God. So verse 25 says, these people who God gave over to uncleanness changed the truth of God into a lie. The term change suggests they exchanged the truth of God. They said, we're not going to worship God. We don't want to believe in God. And they turn and they worship the creature, the created thing. The created thing might be the devil. He was a created thing. It might be a demon spirit. That's a created thing. It might be the sun or the moon or the ocean. They're all created things. It might be simply an image of a false god of some sort. Religion continues. And again, as I pointed out, we live in a very religious world. It'll always be religious because they never give up worshiping something, but they turn to worship the creature, the created thing, more than the creator, who is blessed forever. Now, we look at verse 26, because verse 26 takes us like another step. God gave them to uncleanness. They responded by changing the truth of God into a lie and started worshiping the created thing. And then verse 26 says, here's what happens when you turn away from God. Verse 26, for this cause, God gave them up to vile affections. God gave them up to vile affections. That's wickedness. That's terrible sinfulness. God says, I'm going to give you up to that which is absolutely wicked, something that lends itself to sinful nakedness, if you will. And then look how the verse goes on, verse 26. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. Listen to it. For even the women, the female, their women did change the natural use. Now, the natural use of the woman, the term use is not a demeaning term, but the natural life and experience of the woman is to be with a man. But this verse says that the women did exchange the natural use into that which is against nature. What a terrible condemnation. The woman turns her life to live in a way that is against nature. God created us. God created us with purpose. Again, God created male and female, that male and female might get married and fill the earth and serve God, worship God, raise children who would love God. And societies turn away from God, and God says, okay, then I'll come to the point where I'm going to turn away from you. and I'm going to give you over to your sin. You want to sin? I'll give you over to your sin. And women fall into that practice against the very nature that God gave them. And then verse 27, and folks, this is homosexuality. This is the lesbian. Verse 26, this is the so-called gay man. What a joke to call a man in that kind of sin gay. But in any event, verse 27 says, and likewise also the men leaving the natural use of the woman. So the man says, okay, I'm not going to have a relationship with a woman anymore. It says the men burned. That's a harsh term. That's a strong term. They burned in their lust one toward another. Man with man, working that which is unseemly. Again, that which is vile and wicked, that which is unnatural. And listen, this is interesting. And receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meet, which was fit. You know, right now we're dealing with this thing called monkeypox, and they're trying to describe it as an emergency for all people of the nation. Listen, that's a consequence of the sin of homosexuality. And I think that's being demonstrated in the studies that are being done. And there are other sins that are associated with immorality and vile sexual practices, all kinds of sins. AIDS, what a terrible, terrible disease that was. Well, this is where it came from. And God says, you reject nature, you reject the way I created you, and you start going off and living in some vile and disgraceful way, there will be consequences. God built that into the system, if you will. Now, verse 28, because this continues, this pattern continues. Verse 28 says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge. You see, that's what happens when you begin to move into deep sinful patterns. There might yet be some measure of conviction or challenge to your heart, to your mind. Am I doing the wrong thing? Could I be judged by God if there is a God? And so this crowd who calls themselves atheists, we've already pointed out they're not atheists. They know there's a God, but here's what the verse says. They don't like to retain God in their knowledge. Oh, listen, they'll come to the point where they hate God. They don't want to think about God. They don't want to talk about God. They don't want to believe in God because they know this, and the text will show us later. They know this. If there is a God, and deep inside they know there is, if there is a God, I'm going to be judged for my sin. So they don't like to retain God in their knowledge. God says, oh, you don't like to retain me in your knowledge? Listen to verse 28. God gave them over. You see these statements being made? God gave them up. God gave them up. Again, verse 26. Now, verse 28. God gave them over. God says, okay. You don't want me? You don't want to serve me? You don't want to honor me? You don't want to worship me? God gave them over, it says, to a reprobate mind. A corrupt mind, a mind that doesn't think right, a mind that doesn't understand right. Oh, listen, people are in serious mental trouble when they turn away from God and their thinking is totally corrupted, totally false, totally in error, totally idolatrous, totally wicked. When God gives you over to a reprobate mind, that term reprobate means disapproved. It means hard. It means rejected by God. And God gets to that point with people. It's a tragedy. But when God sees they're gone, that's why he judged Sodom. When he sees they're gone, he says, fine, I'm gonna give you over. That's what you want? I'm gonna give you over. It says here, he gave them over to a reprobate mind. Now listen, to do those things which are not convenient. You know what that means? To do things that are not fit for humanity. And that's where we are. That's where we are. That's where we are with the homosexuality. That's where we are with the transgenderism. That's where we are with all these things that are just showing up and destroying our society. They are not fit practices for humanity. Now listen to me. You got this group today who are coming on trying to say that, oh, they are Christians and they love God and God has accepted them in their homosexual practices and they have their churches and all are welcome. Listen, you go back and you read the Bible, you believe the Bible, and you're going to find out that God has no time for these sins. And anybody who is practicing these sins, if they somehow think they're okay with God, they're fooling themselves. Look at verse 29, because you look at our society, look at the absolute corruption that is developing in our country. Because verse 29 and the following verses of this chapter tell us the story. This is what happens when you reject God. It gets worse and worse and worse. So verse 29 says, being filled with all unrighteousness, all kinds of unrighteousness. People don't care about doing right. To be righteous is to do what's right. And to know what is right, you have to go back to the Bible and find out what's right. And we live in a society that says they don't care what's right. And they're not going to do what's right. They're going to do what they want to do. Filled with all unrighteousness and fornication. Fornication is a term used in the Bible. It can be used in a technical sense, but it can also be used in a general sense of just across-the-board immorality, all kinds of immorality. Not just the homosexual and the transgender stuff and so on, but all kinds of immorality. It might be premarital intimacy. It might be adultery. All kinds of sin. And that's where we are. And then the term wickedness. Wickedness means a lawlessness. Do you see in our society today there's no regard for law? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's right and wrong. You got people in leadership positions in this country who obviously couldn't care less about what's right, wrong, good, bad, true, false, legal, illegal. They'll do anything they can get away with. That's what our nation is coming to, folks. Then what? Covetousness, greed, getting what you want, not caring about anybody else, just desiring to have more and more and more. Maliciousness, hurting people, destroying people, attacking people, full of envy. Not just the covetousness of, oh, I want more, but rather, you've got it and I want it. They hate people who are successful. Murder. Murder is one of the kinds of wickedness that comes. And of course, we've got it all over the streets of the big cities. Yes, the blue cities, the blue states, more than the red. But listen, it's all over the place. Murder. Debate. Debate meaning calling into question truth. Deceit. Dishonesty. Malignity. Maligning people. Trying to destroy people. Whisperers. Same idea. Going behind somebody's back, just trying to destroy somebody's reputation and testimony. Similar to the next term, backbiters. Going after people, attacking them, speaking evil of them, speaking evil to them. And then this that we've already seen reference to, really, but here it is. Haters of God. Haters of God. See, on the one hand, they say there is no God, and then they turn around and they hate God. Doesn't seem to work very well, does it? Haters of God. They hate God. They know he exists. And listen, let me tell you something. If you love God, they'll hate you too. They are despiteful. They despise people who try to live for God, try to do right. They are proud of themselves. Pride in the sense that they take offense if anybody would dare speak against them or point out their errors. Boasters. Again, just telling everybody how wonderful they are as if they're the ones who have earned everything they've got. They are inventors of evil things. That's an amazing statement, because the world is continually coming up with new kinds of evil and wickedness. Listen to this one: disobedient to parents. Now, the kids have always been disobedient to their parents, but this stated here is something that marks this time period and marks these kind of people. Young people are growing up with a hatred for and a continual disobedience to their folks. Now, a lot of that, I think, falls on parents. Parents today are more irresponsible than ever before. They're not rearing and training their children properly, so they're getting the results. But that's typical of our age and our time. Without understanding, boy, that's for sure. They don't understand God. They don't understand truth. They don't understand life. They are covenant breakers. You can't trust somebody. Make a promise, make a commitment. They'll break it if they can. You might have a contract. They can get away with breaking the contract, not doing what they're supposed to do. Today, it seems like they will. We've already seen reference to this: without natural affection. Look at abortion. All this turmoil that has been going on in this country for so long because a mother no longer has the natural affection that she should have for her child. Women who want to tell you that abortion is about their body, not about the life of the baby, are lying to themselves, and they're lying to everybody else. Natural affection. What could be more normal, more natural than for a mom to love the child that she's carrying? Implacable. Implacable. Nothing's ever good enough. Nothing ever satisfied. It doesn't matter what you offer, they want more. Unmerciful. Oh, they don't care. There's no mercy. There's no grace. They're interested in themselves, and they don't care who they walk over. And I've gone through all these things, just kind of throwing out some of the ideas of these terms. But what I want you to see is these terms are giving a picture of a society that has walked away from God, a nation that has walked away from God. This description is not only a picture of the world in general. Unfortunately, it is a picture of the United States of America. It's a picture of where you live and where I live. And I don't know if there's any turning back. Verse 32 says this: who, knowing the judgment of God, and then we're right back to that again. They deny God, but what does Paul say? He says, but you know what? Inside, they know the judgment of God. They don't care. As we'll see in a moment, they don't care. They look God right in the face, as it were, and say, God, I don't care. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you are going to do. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. What a tragedy. But it says this: who, knowing the judgment of God. Well, let me remind you of it. Every single person will stand before God someday. I'm going to, you're going to. Who, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death. Not just the first death, there's another death. The Bible calls it the second death. It's eternal death. And when you spit in the face of God, you make yourself more than ever worthy of death. When you do the things without caring what God thinks or says, you're worthy of death. But it says, knowing that they which do such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, they're doing them anyway. And they also, it says, have pleasure in them that do them. They love to see other people sin and get into all kinds of filth in their life too. Well, our time is going, but I want to tell you, you and I are living out Romans 1 in this country. But God demands purity. And it doesn't matter whether everybody else turns away from purity or not. You and I need to live it. You and I need to claim it. You and I need to find it in the Word of God. I hope you will. I hope that's your heart. Lord bless you. Till next time.